On May 28, 1944, the USS Lagarto slid down timbers into the Manitowoc River, one of 28 submarines built by the Manitowoc Shipbuilding Company. Each of them launched sideways because of the narrowness of the waterway.
It was like 4th of July, and everybody in Manitowoc turned out, all the people from the shipyard, and I think all their families. There was quite a crowd.
This wave went roaring across the river, and it was just way over their heads. It knocked them back. There were people scrabbling around, all soaking wet.
Trials on Lake Michigan followed to make sure everything worked properly, including Lagarto's 86-man crew. Then it was down the Mississippi to New Orleans, through the Panama Canal, and off to Pearl Harbor. Lagarto's commander was Frank D. Latta, a veteran of 9 war patrols and recipient of the Navy Cross. Latta, also a motorcycle enthusiast, kept a secret hidden aboard the sub.
I've often wondered how he managed to keep secret his Harley. At every port, he'd take it apart, break it all down so it would fit down through the hatch, and hide it someplace that the Navy never knew about. And then they get someplace, like in our port, they'd take it out in the dock and put it back together, and off he'd go.
He was very friendly, got along wonderfully with his crew. He was one of my mentors because he was a guy that would really tell me how it was.
But in May 1945, in the Gulf of Siam, now the Gulf of Thailand, Ben Jarvis would see his mentor and Lagarto for the last time. Jarvis's command, the USS Bea, had just outrun a hail of gunfire from a heavily armed Japanese convoy. Latta responded to Bea's call for help, and the two sub-commanders spoke side by side over the open water.
It was a windless night, very flat sea, and we didn't have to use a megaphone at all. He just said, well, you've been shot up and shook up, and I think I better take the next try.
Commander Latta and Lagarto were never heard from again. The sub and her crew, however, would not be forgotten.
Sumatra?
No.
Too far south?
The Wisconsin chapter of the U.S. Submarine Veterans convinced Jamie McLeod, a wreck diver in the Gulf of Thailand, to look for the missing sub. Nearly 60 years to the day that Lagarto disappeared, and roughly 150 miles from shore, McLeod found the missing sub on his first attempt.
First thing I saw was the very, very front of the bow. And then I didn't quite reach the conning tower because I was so excited. I wanted to get the signal up to the guys quickly to come and have a look.
It's a big ocean, there's a lot of wrecks, the coordinates could be from anywhere. Luck was on our side that day, very much so.
The discovery coincided with a state proclamation naming Lagarto Wisconsin's memorial submarine. In March 2007, the Wisconsin Maritime Museum sponsored an expedition to the Gulf of Thailand. John Chatterton and Richie Kohler, profiled in the bestseller Shadow Divers and hosts of History Channel's Deep Sea Detectives, conducted 4 dives on Lagarto, looking for answers to how it sank. Joining Chatterton and Kohler, Evan Kovacs, who not only wears all the specialized rebreather dive gear, but also maneuvers the bulky, watertight housing for his high-definition video camera.
I mean, look at the size of this thing. It's like pushing a smaller fridge through the water.
Descending the guideline, the first and faintest parts of the sub the divers saw were the periscope shears, housings that still contain the periscopes, despite more than 60 years in tropical saltwater. The submarine is sitting upright on a flat, sandy plain in 250 feet of water, encrusted with corals, sea fans, and oysters. Its stern is tightly wrapped in fishermen's nets, but underneath the tangle, the rudder is pushed hard to port, and all of the dive planes are turned downward, indicating a steep dive.
Not just diving and turning, but you're talking a radical dive, a radical turn. Yeah. This was clearly a very extreme, evasive maneuver.
The starboard bow reveals a clue to Lagarto's final moments. A torpedo tube remains open. Kohler put his still camera inside and found it empty. At a remembrance ceremony for Lagarto, hosted by the Wisconsin Maritime Museum, The Navy said the empty torpedo tube indicated that Lagarto's crew was in the midst of a battle.
The middle torpedo tube was open, and the torpedo inside was missing. So USS Lagarto apparently went down fighting.
There is one large hole torn into the port side near the officers' quarters and forward torpedo room.
The Japanese got lucky, a perfectly placed depth charge.
We now know that these American submarines could operate as deep as 700 feet to evade enemy depth charges. Lagarto only had about 230 feet of water, and that's hitting the bottom.
All of this water, just not deep enough you couldn't dive, but if a surface guy was on top of you, because you couldn't maneuver. You didn't have anything underneath you.
They knew that they were in shallow water. They knew that they had nowhere to run. That leads me to believe that rather than just run and hide, we're better off taking a shot and then try to evade.
Observing Chatterton and Kohler, John Kenny of LaGrange, Illinois. Kenny's grandfather was Lagarto signalman William Mabin.
I think the people who at Manitowoc should be very proud of this. These sailors would have really liked to know that when they're gone, and then rediscovered that people care and that they'd want to know their story. And that the fact that no one is tampering with any of their remains. Some people will take items from a dive as mementos. None of that is being done.
The torpedo tube, the dive planes, the damage all leave a frozen image of Lagarto's final moments. It is a snapshot filled with dramatic action.
But what rendered the crew unable to escape the sub?
They could have made an escape at that depth without any trouble.
But why then were all of the hatches found closed? Precisely what happened to Lagarto's crew remains a mystery. In 1945, families in 86 homes across America were told only that their loved ones were missing.
I received a telegram, a little man on a bicycle, just like you see in all the old movies, came to the door and gave me a telegram that said that Harold was missing in action.
When it's missing in action and they really don't know what happened to it, there's no trace of it, there's always this hope that perhaps they'll find him on an island, maybe they're in a prisoner of war camp, maybe they'll come home.
Gradually, Lagarto's families moved on, and only now are learning more about the secrets that lay in a war grave half a world away.